Hello, everybody. This is Digonto from Broken Journal. You know what? This podcast is very, very special for me because I have with me none other than Shauli Chakraborty, somebody whom I have seen grow, evolve, first as a journalist, later on as a teacher, and now as an author. Well, Shauli, welcome to the show.
Thank you
Now,
so much.
you know why Shauli is in the news? Because she's just authored this book, Calcutta Chinese. It's a biography of Monica Liu, owner of various Chinese, restaurants in Kolkata, and she's now. The book is actually, making the right noise. But Shauli, first of all, congratulations on the success of the book.
Thank you.
Now, before I delve deep into what the book is all about and all that, let me just praise you, on the fact that you are a multitasker. Okay, you started up from Karsiyong, you came here, did your graduation, masters, whatever. After that, you started journalism, then you shifted to teaching, now an author. So, what does it take to be a multitasker?
I think women are naturally inclined to be multitaskers because they don't have any other option. They have to manage the home, they have to manage work, they have to manage children, they have to manage the household chores. So everything together, still in Indian society, a woman has no option but to be a multitasker. So it's not that a woman becomes a multitasker because she likes it.
Okay.
Because at times she becomes a multitasker because there is no other option, especially in Indian society.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you're saying something?
Yes, so as and when I started out as a journalist and then I had my baby, so then I decided to take a break from full-time journalism and I decided to freelance. And I've also worked on radio as an RJ for All India Radio Kolkata. And then slowly I got into teaching and after a point I realized that I had a new subject, so I decided to write a book about it.
Right.
So that is how this entire transition happened as and when my life progressed from one stage to another.
Did this was this passion kind of ingrained in you in the sense, was it something that was innate in the sense that you always wanted to be an author even when you were
that's true.
doing
Yes.
journalism?
Yes. I got into journalism because I wanted to learn how to write and how much to write. When you become a journalist, the first thing you learn is how to edit. So I joined on the desk and I have worked on the Nation desk, on Page One, on the local city pages as a sub-editor, senior sub-editor. So first I have learned how to edit and then I gradually ventured into reporting and then I started writing more. So because I had a strong background in editing, because I had very good teachers who taught me on the desk how to edit, how much should be printed, what is printable material, what is not printable material. So then when I got into writing, I knew that this much should be written. At times, people go with the flow and they write whatever they have. But you also have to draw the line and know how much to write, where to place it, how much of it you should say, and how much of it should be left to the imagination. So these things you learn when you are a journalist.
Right.
So by the time I became a mother, so then by that time I had quite a few years of experience, like 15, 16 years of experience in journalism. So then I decided to venture into writing books because I thought that this was the right time I can start.
Right. Now the thing is, how tough was it to, kind of paint down your thoughts or rather write this book, to be very honest, because you're doing journalism, you're also doing teaching, then you have, you have a son to tend to, you have a husband as well, and either way caring husband, I must appreciate. So the family support did come in handy, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. My husband, my mother, my father, even my son who's in class 8 now, they have also worked around my schedule. Like, my husband has been very supportive, he has looked after my son when I have been away doing assignments. My mother has pitched in a lot. She has done a lot of babysitting for my son. My father also has done a lot of babysitting for my son. So, the fact that I have been able to pursue my passions in different ways is because of the support I have got at home. And now my son has also, understood that my mother is going to be doing a lot of things. There will be a point of time when she will not be there. So he knows that, that when my mother is away, I'm going to stay with my grandmother. So now, my son has also, since he's in class 8 now, almost a teenager, he knows by now that this is how his life is going to be. So he's got used to the fact to see his mother going out. Which when he was younger, he was, very happy. But now he has understood.
Right. Now, you've done journalism, obviously, you've kind of covered a lot of fields and all that. But I would never relate to you as a food journalist per se, because you're more into, I think, hardcore journalism, features, entertainment. You interviewed Shah Rukh Khan, I remember. Now, this thought process, how did it kind of, how was it born actually?
Yes, I tell you, see, this is not a food. A lot of people have come to me telling me that, has it got recipes? Are there good food pictures? Is it a street food? Or are you talking about the food in China? The food is the last chapter in the book. And it is the story of how the Chinese community in Calcutta, how that community has grown over the years, how the inception of that community, how they came to Calcutta, under what circumstances their ancestors had to leave China, and then they came here, and how they set up their businesses. Then the leather business tanked, and many Chinese left Tangra, they went to Canada, many went to Australia, and some people stayed back, and the huge leather factories and the buildings were still there, and they didn't know what to do with them. Then one of them, Mrs. Monica Liu, her husband was also into the leather business. She decided to turn one of the buildings into a restaurant. And she, nowadays we see a lot of home chefs who serve food to people from their own kitchen. But Mrs. Liu was one of the first people in Tangra who invited her guests to her kitchen. So, people like Munmun Sen and Shashi Kapoor.
When did it start?
Yes, it started in the 90s, her restaurant. So, she invited people into her kitchen. All kinds of Bollywood celebs who have been to Calcutta have been to Monica Liu's home, because at that time, this home chef thing was a very new thing. She used to invite people to her kitchen. She would make them sit. She would serve them drinks, and she would cook herself and serve the food. Right from Buddhadev Babu to Jyoti Basu to everybody, the who's who of Calcutta, Shumil Gangopalai, Amitabh Ghosh, everybody has been to Mrs. Liu's Beijing, and they know the kind of ambience that comes over there, the way she cooks her own food and she serves it to people. But people don't know why this happened. It is because the leather business tanked. And the Chinese people were left with very few options, They could make, some of them were hairdressers, some of them were dry cleaners, and a lot of them, since they had that infrastructure of those huge buildings in Tangra, they didn't know what to do about it. They started restaurants. So when Mrs. Liu's restaurant became a success, Kimling was the first restaurant, then she opened Tung Fong, and then Mandarin. So when one after another her restaurants became a success, that is when everybody else in Tangra also started restaurants, and Chinatown became a food hub in Calcutta. So she was the pioneer of Chinatown in Calcutta, and the book is about not just the food that you get in Chinatown, it is also the history of Chinatown,
Chinese culture,
the history of the community. That is what the book is about. The food is the last chapter.
Food is the last chapter, yeah.
Yes.
Now, tell me something. While doing kind of a meticulous research on this book, you must have had several interactions with her, isn't it?
Yes.
So, how responsive was she, and how open was she?
Yes, she was very open. When I approached her about the book, it was during the pandemic. I called her up and I said, "Ma'am, I was thinking, you've had a very interesting life, and I was thinking if we could do a book about you." So she told me, "Okay, come and meet me in my office." So the next day I went to her office.
During the pandemic?
During the pandemic. When after the initial 3 months, when we were allowed to travel a little. So then, when the lockdown was lifted, the first lockdown was lifted. So then I went one day to her house, and we discussed that, "Ma'am, I was thinking of doing this book, and this is how I was planning. If you agree, then you can do it."
So, how much time did it take to the entire
It took
process?
almost 3 because of the pandemic we got delayed
And you kept it a
several
secret.
times.
We
Yes.
met several times during the course of those 3 years. We've had tea sessions out here, lots of sessions, walking sessions, but you never divulged. But that's fine. It was a breaking news for me. Now
No,
the
it was also because I was doing somebody else's life, so I had that obligation. Unless they
no,
announce,
absolutely, I agree.
I cannot
will
announce.
just, I was just putting
Yes.
it. Now the thing is, tell me something. Several portions, several aspects have been covered by this book. But what about the socio-political structure of the Chinese and their perspective towards India, Indo-China relations?
See, the
did you
Chinese-
have the opportunity to kind of talk to her on this and all
Yes,
that?
yes. There is a chapter in the book where during the Indo-China War, her family was taken prisoner, and they were kept in the Deodi camp in Rajasthan for 7 years. They were locked up in that camp, and it was like a refugee camp. So, and Chinese people from all over the northeast India and also from other parts of India, all of them were kept over there. There are many people who lost their lives during that time. And later on, the government of India, apologized to them formally. Mrs. Liu was invited by Lal Bahadur Shastri and many other political leaders who went on to be prime ministers, and they have apologized to her, not just to her, but the Chinese community as a whole, for the way the community was treated during the war, Indo-China war, and the 7 years that they were kept in that camp, because they were, people thought they were Chinese spies, but Mrs. Liu told me that we were so poor, we didn't have 2 square meals a day at that time. So from how could we even think of spying?
Right.
So they were very initially first generation or second generation Chinese people. When they came to India, they started, selling momos and tofu on the street. Yes, so that is how and from there, years later, they went on to make their first restaurant. So see, when we ourselves are on the street, how can we be spies for somebody else? So yes, she did talk to me about the hardships that the community went
Now she
through during
considers
that time.
herself more an Indian than a Chinese. I think.
Yeah, she is an Indian. She is an Indian. It is just that they have, they have that Mongolian features.
No, that's fine.
And their ancestors come from China. That's why they're called Chinese. But
Do they
everybody
still
is
feel
born in
ostracized?
India.
Sorry to butt in.
Yeah.
Do they still feel ostracized? Because we are used to hearing news about how people with Oriental looks are kind of mocked
Yes,
at.
yes, yes. It is true that people who come with Mongolian features, they are always looked down upon in Indian society.
Right.
So people will call them Chinky, people will call them Chinese. They have this. Even people who come from the northeast,
Yeah, yeah.
they are also bullied by random people on
They
the
have been
streets.
bullied in several universities and colleges.
Yes, not just students, even on the road, if
Right.
you see them after dark, people automatically think of them in a different light. So, for the ordinary people, that kind of prejudice is still there, but then slowly people are also becoming more aware. These days there is on account of our pop culture, that we read a lot about writers from the Northeast. Writers from the Northeast are writing good books then about their community as a whole, and they are also writing about the life of the people in the Northeast, like in Nagaland, Manipur, Kohima. Nowadays, because of the internet also, there is more awareness on several OTT series, they have been shot in the Northeast. As a result, the awareness has grown from before, but I think we need to do a lot more to make the northeastern part of India more inclusive, so that they feel more inclusive.
How has been the response? It's been overwhelming because I've been reading articles about your book and all that. Tell me something about the reaction and how positive are you, and how you kind of design your next course of action so far as authoring another book is concerned.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised by the response we got. The day we launched the book on Chinese New Year in Chinatown, in Calcutta. So the Chinese consulate, he had come to launch the book. He was the chief guest. So when he came, he told me that he read the book, and he told everybody in the audience that this is the first book about the Chinese community in Calcutta. Nobody has written about them ever before. So So that is
So
what.
it's the first of its kind.
Yes, that is what the ambassador, the consulate told me. And on that day itself, because it was Chinese New Year and there was a big gathering like it happens every year in Chinatown, so a lot of people bought the book. Like I was surprised. Like there is this Chinese carnival that takes place for 2 days in Chinatown. So I think during the Chinese carnival, we sold almost 100 copies of the book during the first 2-3 days while the carnival lasted. So I was very surprised. This is not what I was expecting. This was beyond my expectations. But God has been kind, and I'm very grateful to everybody who has either read my book, talked about the book, or has some way spread a good word about the book. I'm grateful to everybody.
Will there be a sequel to this book, or something else that you're planning?
I don't know about a sequel yet. I think that Mrs. Liu will take that decision.
Okay.
But
she has lots of things to say, I guess.
If she decides to do another book, then maybe she will tell me. But as of now, we haven't thought about anything as of now.
So what's your next idea that you can zero in on? If you can just spill the beans, or in the journalistic terms, you can just break this.
No, I haven't actually. I'm still thinking of. I have 2 or 3 ideas in mind, but I haven't yet finalized on any of them.
Okay.
So I'm working out, trying to think things over, and also trying to do some kind of initial amount of research. So as of now, I can't really tell you. It's not because I don't want to. It's
You haven't
because
thought of
that
it.
I
You haven't thought
haven't
of it.
zeroed in on any
Zero in,
subject.
fine. Now, coming back to journalism, Shauli, just to before we kind of wind up, I know it's a Sunday and you have some plans as well. The thing is, you've been, to be very honest, an outstanding journalist. Though we've always had our share of tips and scuffles and arguments and all that. One particular story related to Russia still constantly, but that's fine. But I've always held you in very high esteem. Now the thing is, this decision to kind of shift from full-fledged journalism to teaching, did it have something to do with maybe your kind of frustration with the way things were kind of shaping up, or whatever it is? Because you are a full-time journalist.
Yes, what happened is after a point I realized that journalists are not paid well.
Okay.
Yes, the first deterrent is you see people from other professions, they're paid well. Even if you are a content head or a content writer, even then you are paid really well. But as a journalist, you're not paid much. Secondly, slowly, the authentic journalism that began to vanish. It all became copy paste from this website and that website. So people stopped doing the legwork, and it's not because
This gives me the headline actually.
with that, and it is not because the reporters did not want to. It is because they were not given the infrastructure with which they could do it. Suppose I have to go to a place to do a story, but if the media house doesn't provide a car, how am I supposed to do? Or if my cab fare is not reimbursed, how am I supposed to go and do that story? So that infrastructural support began to wane, salaries became bare minimum, and especially in Calcutta, people moved out. A lot of people moved out of the city. Some very good journalists.
A lot of our Kutkaris have actually left journalism.
Yes, and
They
a lot
do
of
something
people.
else.
Yes, a lot of people quit journalism and went into public relations, corporate communication, which is very sad. It is very sad, mostly because it is. We had a lot of, when I started out as a journalist, people were doing really well. Journalism was such a respected profession. But because of these factors, where people are, and there were job cuts left, right, and center. Like today you have a job, tomorrow they send you a mail at night, and tomorrow you don't have an office. So there was no job security. So all these factors slowly made me realize that I should move on to something else.
Has the advent of digital media been a kind of a vein for journalism? Because there's so much of competition, people are all into this rat race of being ahead of the rest so far as publishing stories is concerned and all that. Has the quality been compromised in the process?
See, digital media is something you cannot escape. As long as there is social media, there will always be digital media. So you cannot escape that. But I think what we can do is we can strive towards making our reports more authentic, instead of just quoting sources, or without going and finding out ourselves and depending on what other people have written and writing down stuff depending on what somebody else's experience has been. So if we strive towards making our work, our copies more authentic, I think we can still turn things around.
So, two more questions. I mean, given an opportunity, if you're asked to come back to journalism, full-fledged journalism, with a very lucrative offer and all that, will you be game for that?
Yeah, why not? It's a good offer, why not?
And what's your message to budding journalists?
I think my message to budding journalists will be keep it as authentic as possible. Don't copy paste from other places. If you are a reporter, go to the spot, find things out, build your own sources. Don't do something because somebody else has done.
Right.
Chart your own path.
Right.
I think that is the best thing
Right.
I can say.
So, guys, if you're an aspiring journalist, obviously, you got tips from a veteran one. I'm sure she won't put up with me for calling her veteran, but she's been around for quite some time. And she has been into full-fledged journalism. She knows the intricacies of the media work, so she's probably the best person to give you suggestion as to how you should go about things if you really want to make it big as a journalist. Thank you, Shauli, on a Sunday, sparing some time for me, and it's been a kind of an honor and a privilege for me to get to talk to you, and various insights, various facets to your characterial traits, your perspective, they have actually been unraveled. Thank you so much once again. Thank you, Poshita. And guys, if you haven't read the book, please do. Calcutta Chinese, a biography of Monica Liu by none other than Shauli Chakraborty. Thank you so much. Happy Mother's Day and God bless.